العالمين وأفضل الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وشفيء ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على
محمد
وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم جميعا.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
As always, we want to use these opportunities to focus on what we can learn, to focus on what we can apply, to focus on commemoration and remembering what happened, to focus on deepening our understanding, deepening our depth, deepening our spirituality and our spiritual levels. These occasions, when we gather, the last thing that, or the least effective thing would be to only talk about some aspects without applying or connecting them to the time, the circumstance, the situation which we're living in right now. If we think about the value of how something as, for example, Karbala, the events that transpired, if it remains just a story of the past, incident which occurred, this is the story, and that's the end of it. And when we get together, that's the extent of our remembrance, then we have definitely not done justice to the whole cause and purpose. And so it's no different, on the occasion of the martyrdom of Bibi Fatimah, peace be upon her, to just gather and to mention some things about her passing away, her martyrdom, and to move on, it's not sufficient. It's not doing justice to even the teachings that she gave, which the ahadith from her, the lessons we can learn from her. Alhamdulillah, some of them were alluded to and mentioned. So we have to find ways and opportunities to collectively increase our spirituality. There's one thing when, you on your own, you're sitting at home and you're just, you're watching a YouTube, you're reading a book, you're studying, you're looking at an article, a link or something like that. Something increases for you or not. That's good. And that's at an individual level though. What can we do together as a group to grow as a group? Because significant change happens only by a group. I want you to think about something. We could say that in the present time, Prophet Isa, peace be upon him, who we believe is still alive, or Imam Mahdi, Ajalullah Ta'ala Farajum Sharif, may Allah hasten his reappearance, who we believe is alive and awaiting. We could argue that these are some of the most important and most influential, most spiritual, most knowledgeable, you name it, most whatever you want to name, human beings on this planet. Yet alone, they have not created a revolution to change the world. I want us to think about this. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we believe that from the amongst all of creation, the greatest and most superb was the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. With all of his greatness, did he alone, just by himself, Was he able to change everything in society? Even with all the good, there was a need for companions. There was a need for the Alis, the Miqdads, the Salmans, the Bilals. There was a need for group effort. He was giving the message, and people were coming and joining, and that momentum is what we see today in 2 billion Muslims across the world. It's not to take away, anything from the greatness of the Imam of the time, but it's something to be said about how what Allah intends for us to become successful must happen through a group. It says that, this blows my mind when I think about this, but it says there are some, we have some riwayat about the number of prophets, 124,000 prophets, according to some narrations. Thousands of prophets that came to people to give them guidance, to show them the way. This is the right thing. This is the wrong. This is the right way. This is what makes you successful. This is the way to get closer to God. This is the way to success. And it says sometimes amongst all of a nation, an entire nation of people, sometimes one family or two families would convert or would follow the Prophet. Can you imagine? Amongst thousands of people, sometimes just one or two people would actually believe. There is something to be said about the importance of what can happen in the scope of a community that can never happen with an individual, no matter how great the individual is. And we know this for a fact because the Prophet Muhammad was the greatest of all examples. He alone did not change the entire world by himself without the help of the people. Yes, he was the best example. He led the way. But someone had to be the Ali. Someone had to be the Bilal. Someone had to be the spreading of this message. Some people had to join in. Do we think that when there was the battles against Mushrikeen, it was Rasulullah alone fighting against all of these people? There were people who were willing to sacrifice even their life. So there is something that we must still understand about spirituality in its full context. For us to achieve it, it must happen in the setting of a group. There are some things we have to do as individuals, but then a team must come together, and then you can compete on a larger scale, right? A great team is the sum of its each component or each player. You put them together, then you have a great team. Each person is individually doing their self-development, their spiritual journey, their learning, their education, so on and so forth, their treatment of others. You put them together. If that continues, their treatment of others becomes their next level of growth. Marriage, right? I'm sure you have heard, everyone has heard, marriage is half of your faith, right? No, it's not half of your faith. And wrong answer. Why is it the wrong answer, Shaykh? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that any two idiots can get married. You don't have to even be a good person to get married. Why is that half of faith? Did you accomplish anything by nikah? Is not half of faith. The act of just marriage itself is not half of faith. That's not an accomplishment. Right now, the worst human being in the world, they marry, and then they marry again, they marry again. No, that's half of faith? I don't know, what kind of math is that? They'll say they've done half of faith many times over. What is it talking about in this idea? It's talking about A person being successful in marriage, that is half of faith. Why is that even important? Because the test of a human being when they are single or alone is totally different than when they're married. It's night and day. Ask any married person. It's night and day. This is not the same thing. It's a whole nother level of spiritual growth. You ask somebody, are they patient? They might think to themselves, yes, alhamdulillah, I have attributes of patience. Then they get married. And they have to deal with patience on another level with their spouse or with their child or children or family members or in-laws. And this gets bigger, community members. The scope increases. That is the time when things like a virtue like patience, you can find out. Not you by yourself, alone. That's not a time we can really find out the truth. It comes when we're tested with other people. That's when it manifests in the full scope. There are some tests on an individual level, but on the full scope, it happens in a community context, in a group context. Why are we even talking about this? What does this have to do with Hazrat Fatimah? You're Sheikh, you're talking about marriage, you're talking about community, you're talking about this and that. What is to talk about Hazrat Fatimah, Zikr Musibat? Let's do that for an hour, then we'll feel good about ourselves. Let's take some lessons from Hazrat Fatimah. Let's understand something. Okay. The reason why all of this topic about understanding how the growth for a Muslim begins as an individual, but it will become stagnant and it cannot grow except in a community context. The reason why that is important is because a lot of times the martyrdom of Hazrat Fatima becomes a point where people go and join different spectrums of extreme perspective that create and foster nothing but disunity, that move us away from the thing that we need to grow as a community. There's one thing that I would encourage us to really focus on, and that is to have the kind of intellectual perspective and understanding of our religion. And I'm not talking about just academic when I say intellectual. I'm talking about a deeper understanding, ma'rifat. We have to be seekers of ma'rifat, seekers of a depth of understanding. Yes, we have to be seekers of truth. What does that look like? That is for the person who has the most ma'rifat, this arif, this person who understands on a high level. That is what that will look like in its best forms. For us, we're trying to get to that level. Understanding that the martyrdom of Hazrat Fatima, peace be upon her, has been taken by those who are enemies of Islam, enemies of the unity of Muslims, and become a weapon to use just to create disunity, just to prevent or stunt the growth of Muslims. Now, there's already some people right now having some reservations, some questions. I'm going to answer those, inshallah. We're going to tackle those. I like to remind us that you know, we don't want to take anything away from what is truth. That's first and foremost. What is haqq, what is truth? There's no intention, no desire or goal that we want to take away from that. Okay, that should be first and foremost understood. Secondly, the truth of the lofty station of Hazrat Fatimah sallallahu alayha is one unparalleled. I don't want to go into all of this today because I want to get to some very important points. But in a different lecture, on a different occasion, this was my focal point in speaking about how to understand Hazrat Fatimah. Because one of the criticisms or reservations that some people might have is that, well, if Hazrat Fatimah was so important, then why isn't she mentioned in the Quran? Right? If I'm objective, maybe I think, well, that's a good question. Or certain other figures. First of all, the book of the Quran it's a book of guidance. It's not a phone book. It's not just a book with names and context and every person in history, every good person from beginning to end should be mentioned there. The Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, who is the recipient of this divine revelation, how many times is he mentioned? A handful of times by name is mentioned in the Quran. Does that take away from his value of who he was? But the verses about, the meaning about, the definition of, the manifestation of who this person is, this is something that we have to pay attention to. The verse in Surah Al-Imran, Mubahala, where it says, where the prophet is challenging people, those people who were basically had a claim against him in terms of what is the truth, and him being the true messenger of God and being upon truth. So the Christians of Najran, they challenge him. One of the things that it mentions that there's a delegation that goes to meet with the prophet. They come back. They have discussions, meetings. Eventually, they basically say, we're going to go through and we're going to meet at this event of Mubahala. We're going to meet at this event of Mubahala where the prophet will bring his the most important people to him, and we'll bring our close people, and we'll invoke God's curse upon whoever is wrong. Now, the leaders of those Christians, some of the pastors or priests, they said to them that they advised the delegation, if you get to the point of meeting and you see that Muhammad, peace be upon him, has brought all of the peasants, all of the poor people, any person he could find, just every person in the city he brought to that event, he says, go through with it, he advised them. He said, but if you see that he brought his close and near ones, then do not go through with it. Because that means that he's willing to sacrifice the most important and dear people to him for this cause. You're invoking the curse of Allah. And he comes and he brings his daughter, Fatimah sallallahu alayhi, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Hassan and Hussein alayhim salam. That act alone, mentioned in verse 61, that act alone is a proof of representation Who was the representative of all of the women that the Prophet brought? Only Fatimah. There is something to be said about her status, in addition to the many traditions that exist about her. Now, when we talk about the how the spiritual growth for every individual, there's a component of community building that's necessary, or connecting to community that's necessary in order to grow further. There's so much that a human being can do alone as an individual. What we are witness to is that Islam has been under attack for some time. So there are elements and forces at work that realize that the greatest threat to us is people to learn about Islam. That is the greatest threat. And so we will do anything to suppress that threat. I want us to be intellectual in asking these questions of why, right? You know, they have this this thing that they do as, you know, for university students. Sometimes they might do this as, you know, for them or other places as a workshop, but they do this thing called the 5 whys. The idea behind 5 whys is that if you keep asking the question why and keep going back, then you get to a deep, deep root cause and understanding, right? And if we ask why on the surface, maybe we get a surface understanding. Being is how the enemies of Islam are working diligently night and day, not taking time off. We have to be that diligent in our understanding of the solutions to these problems, of understanding what our approach needs to be. What should we be doing? How should we be seeing things? Unfortunately, in a lot of situations and cases, we are not able to look very deep and understand the why this would even happen. You know, we last series of lectures that we did, I believe it was Muharram, or maybe if I'm not mistaken, but I talked a lot about the issues of social justice. Some of them we touched on. And, you know, it's always interesting that there are people who don't understand the gravity of some of the things that are happening in the society, in the world, in America especially. You know, so the president would tweet out something and they would say, well, why would he say that? Go deeper into those whys. Why is he even president? Why is there a system that allows someone like this to become in charge? Oh my God, why did this happen in the Capitol building? No, keep asking the why. Why is a society that allows this to happen? Why were there police officers that were helping this to happen? Why was there groups and efforts which where people in power advocated for this to happen? Why was there a system in place which allows this to happen? And you get down to the deep-rooted understanding that there is a foundational problem, a problem deep in the foundation, deep in the core. So when we start to hear different types of very, very much anti-Shia or anti-Sunni rhetoric, this is not about truth. When you ask why the person is talking like that, it is not because of the truth. Is it because they want to share the truth? Let's think about that. Let's ask ourselves the question, why about that? This is very popular. In fact, unfortunately, a lot of times people enjoy to hear someone go on the minbar yelling waving their hands, making trying to claim that their motive, their why is about professing truth. All at the same time, while they are trying to dehumanize or vilify a whole group of people, a whole sect of Muslims in the process. Here is where we get to seeing that there is something deeper beyond this why. What is the reason for that? Now, if we want to understand the reality of what transpired in the martyrdom of Hazrat Fatimah, and we want to understand what were the details that happened, who did what, this in and of itself is its own extensive study. When I hear someone on the minbar, for example, someone, whether they're wearing a turban or not, but in this position of giving knowledge to the people, so to speak, and they begin to talk about certain details, I wonder why. Ask this question, why? I've heard someone say, well, this is the truth. This incident happened in this way, this detail, this is the truth. The door, the nail, or the slap, or the burning of the, this is the truth, and so I have to expose the truth. Okay. Why? Again, what is behind that? Okay. Let us say that absolutely you have done your due diligence, you have definitive knowledge, and you want to, why? What are you trying to accomplish? There is a whole list of people who will be going to hellfire, many ahadith that mention. One of those groups of people are people who learn knowledge to argue. I want to argue with people. I know some things. The clear sign of someone who is ignorant. Because the result of knowledge is humility, humbleness. Someone who, I know some things. Now I need to expose and express my opinion in this way. I need to argue with people. I need to show that I know. These are distinctive positions of people who will be going to hellfire. Someone who just says their knowledge, they just want to show. Someone who wants to argue just for the sake of arguing, or for their nafs, to feel good about themselves. Or you want to show you want to prove to Ahl Sunnah so that you feel good about yourself? Why? Again, why? There is a sickness, fi qulubihim maradun. There is a sickness in the hearts of some people who Allah increases that sickness upon. That is the disease of that pride. The disease of, I just want to say because I want to say. I just want to say because this makes me feel good about myself. You know, someone posted on social media, I am unapologetically Shia, so don't talk to me about unity. Don't tell me about, you know, this unity and this and that between Sunni and Shia when Sunnis did this to Hazrat Fatimah, and went on and on and on. I said, you know, first of all, if you want to be objective, there is no contradiction with unity and truth. There's absolutely no contradiction. In fact, the proof of this is in how Muslims deal with non-Muslims every single day. How you find ways to be polite, to be productive, to work together, to do business together, to accept them as a client, to give them a ride somewhere, to work for them. You find ways every single day. Yet, now you're unapologetically Shia and you can't have unity with Sunni brothers and sisters? Really? Are you more unapologetically Shia than Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam? Are you saying that his patience, while the point of view of the Shia is that he is the rightful successor of the Prophet, and that he was patient throughout that period of time, and his few years, his 4 years or so of Khilafah, of his leading, that he was patient? But you don't have patience. You're more noble of a Shia than Imam Ali. I don't understand this. The why? You need to be unapologetically Shia? No problem. Why are you saying this? Why are you engaging in this way? Why are you attacking in this way? So we need to differentiate. I try to explain in this way. And I share this because this is a public post. Anyone could see it anywhere if you know about it. I said, you know what? I'm going to break down this why and how we understand what we should look like. What does community building look like? I'm going to show you. My parents are people who were Christian, as many of you all well know. Catholic, not Muslim. The attraction in Islam, as many converts, reverts have said, Islam makes so much sense. The sense of justice is very important. That appeals to the need of every human being to feel that there's justice for them. But I said, you know, when my parents came to Islam, unfortunately, you know, let's be honest. Shias don't do dawah like that. We don't even open our centers to people in that way. We're not even that welcoming. To be fair and honest, people doing dawah on the front lines, not always the Shia community. If someone comes, okay, that's different. We're not going out to tell people in that way. So many people, the majority of people that come to Islam in America, first they're Sunni. I know many people that became Shia. I can name on one hand the ones that initially became Shia. Most of them, they were Sunni for a period of time. Eventually, their studies or their learnings led them to embrace the school of thought, the Ja'fari school of thought. Obviously, without throwing away the relationships that they had, that's not necessary. It's a part of the community building. But the point that I want to make is that my parents, in the same way, they were not Muslim. They became Muslim. They were learning from imams and people who were Sunni. And so they went through that stage of learning from Sunni Muslims and being a part of the Sunni community. Very good brothers and sisters in that process. Now, had someone come with that approach, I want to tell you my truth. This is my truth. Hear my truth with this stick, that you're wrong because you believe this and you're a terrible person. What part of us thinks that the person on the receiving end would say, oh, thank you for showing me the light. Thank you for enlightening me. Thank you for beating me in the head with that. Alhamdulillah, I really appreciate you yelling at me and telling me that I am a terroristic person and against God himself and I'm an enemy of the al-Bayt. Thank you so much for enlightening me. Who says that? Who's going to say that? No one. That's who. What happened? How did my parents learn about the Ahlul-Bayt? Obviously, there was the Islamic Revolution of Iran, but specifically, there were people who had brotherhood and sisterhood with. There were Shia Muslims. While they were in university, there were Shia Muslims who embraced them as my Muslim brother. They had no animosity. They didn't assume about what they knew or what they believed. They had none of this conjecture which led to disunity. They were very embracing and open, just like the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt teach us. They were example of the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. What happened? Many dialogue, conversation. It led to trust. It led to friendship. It led to further dialogue. It led to research. Eventually, my parents felt that, yes, some of these events we have questions about. And actually, they formed a study group. The event of the martyrdom of Hazrat Fatimah was one of the focal points of the study group that my late mother, may Allah have mercy on her soul, her friend, may Allah have mercy on her soul, that they came together, that they studied. They would go to university scholars. They would sit with imams and say, this is a question that we have. You know, some friends of ours have posed this. We've been discussing this. We've been researching this. Can you tell us more about this event of Hazrat Fatimah, peace be upon her, how she was martyred? What happened? What are details? Can you give us more? And it left them so thirsty after their research, they said, not getting very detailed answers or not getting enough information. That is what led them to form their own study group and continue to study. But I want to emphasize on one point. Those brothers and sisters who are Shia, while my parents were Sunni, the only reason that my parents were Shia, the only reason that I am here right now, the only reason that I have been to Qom, the only reason that I am a part of this majlis today is because they understood the spirituality of Islamic growth, unity, and brotherhood. And they understood what that looked like, and that's how they approached my parents. They didn't approach them with the stick of I'm right. I have to tell you because it's truth. Let me tell you how we know that that's a fallacy. If someone says I have to speak or this is the truth and I have to say just because it's truth, how many things are true? Someone knows truth about, you know, when you live with someone, your spouse or your friends or your family or your siblings, when you live very close to someone, you get to know all kinds of things about them. You see them when they're not in their best element. You see them with bad morning breath. You see them when they don't smell their greatest. You see them when they don't look their best. Those are truths. Do you need to tell everyone about those truths? Just because it's true doesn't mean that it needs to be said in that way. That's one thing. Someone says, no, but this was an issue that affects the whole ummah. Yes, it affects the whole ummah, and there's implications about that. That is what we have to understand. When Ayatollah Makaram is giving the fatwa and other ulama are saying that be cautious with this, or some scholars are saying be cautious. Some maraja are saying avoid it. What is their reasoning? What are they talking about? They are talking about the implications, which you can be a supporter of. The implications which you may be a support of. When we're talking about what was mentioned earlier about the Lashkar-e Jangi, When we're talking about these terrorists that are targeting Shia Muslims, targeting the Hazara people especially, and over just hundreds of people who they have killed over the years. These are the kind of motives that they look for. These are people who are so sick they don't need it. And their heart is a sickness. They don't need an excuse, let alone add some fuel to the fire. Brother, we have to talk about, yes, we do. And there is a space and a place for dialogue. There's a space and a place for debate. Let me ask you something, though. I don't know if some of you have rode the bus. Some places they have less public transportation than others. Like back in Philly, where I'm from, like public transportation is a really normal thing. You know, people will go without a car for a long time. There's enough you can get around. Some places, no, you need a car, right? But if you've ever been on public transportation, a bus, a subway, or even if you haven't, if you've been in a public space, do you begin to debate with this Christian person about Christianity? Just pull out your stick of justice and begin to wave it at them and tell them about? No, you don't. You never do that. Never. So why do we reserve all of that for our Sunni brothers and sisters? That is something that the why, ask the why. There's the ego. Oh, something feels good about making myself feel good and high and mighty and righteous. The why. What is the niyyah? I heard someone say, well, you know, the person on so-and-so on the member, they give really good talk about this, and they just told the truth. They told it how it was. Okay, the why. Well, we don't know their niyat. We can't know their niyat. We don't know. Okay. If you do not know their niyat, which, yes, that's very plausible. We might not know what's in the hearts of someone, what they were saying. Yes, maybe they meant well. What we judge by, Allah can judge by the niyat. What we at least judge by is the actions which we see. You think that someone coming up to you with a knife and stabbing motion, I don't know their niyat yet. You know, I really don't know what I don't know what's in your heart, brother. Maybe you're just doing some, ritual dance and you're about to bless me with $1 million. I have no idea. Really, though? Do we really not? No, Allah gave us aql and intellect and judgment so that we can understand by the actions of people. We don't have to know the niyat of every single person in that depth. But if someone is on the minbar creating more disunity, creating more anguish, more infighting, and not have any, then those actions itself are problematic. I don't care what their niyat is, it doesn't matter. You know, if someone runs over someone they're driving and they hit 5 people and they kill those people, and it was not intentional, they may still go to jail for involuntary manslaughter. Their intention of doesn't remove responsibility. We have a responsibility at a time, an era like this, when Islam is being attacked. We have a responsibility to create a space of dialogue. How do you create that dialogue? You want to have debate? Create the relationship that allows for debate. Create it. Befriend the Sunni brothers and sisters in such a way that you can sit down and you can honestly have a conversation and debate. We don't care about that. Then we have not understood the why. Our why is a problem. But brother, the truth is right where it's going to be. The truth ain't going nowhere. The truth is right there. We don't need to be against it. We don't need to diminish it. Nothing like that. But when you want to discuss, the strategy is different from the truth. Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein alayhim assalam. We love these people? You love these people? We follow these people? These are our leaders? How did they deal? What was their approach? Imam Hussein had so many opportunities to fight. Before Karbala, he said, I will not throw the first arrow or the first spears. I won't be the one to throw the first arrow. I won't start the fight. He was trying to preserve some level of unity amongst people in some fashion, as much as was possible, until the point where it was no longer possible. Even in Karbala, he's inviting people. Halman Nasir and Yansururi, who's going to answer the call? He's giving people a way, an option. He didn't say, oh, you're going to get it now. Nope, you don't try to join me now, Hor. No, there's no option now. You're going to get it. No. In fact, the why for Imam Hussein, we see so much deeper. We understand so much more about what did the teachings of the Ahlul-Bayt look like? I'm going over a little bit of my time. I'm going to wrap it up in a few minutes, inshallah. We need to distinguish two things. One, there is the aspect of what is truth. Two, there is the aspect of what is the strategy to discuss the truth. Now, I put on one time I was sharing on social media that unfortunately there is this negative connotation in each sect. In the Sunni community, which I have many friends, family, there are people who their idea is that those Shias are tricksters and they're going to try to trick you, and then no matter what they say, it's going to be taqiyya, right? That no matter what it is. So I said, how can you win a discussion? Like, how can you have a discussion? Right? Do you want to have the discussion? You're going to say that the answer is taqiyya anyway? That no, you're just pretending that that's the answer. We have to get to a point where there's trust. We have to get to a point where there is brotherhood. That is a more important focus for the Muslim community. If we don't understand that, we do not understand the context in which we live right now. We have to build community. That is more important. If you think about the person who is close to you, your best friend, a good friend. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, a friend is one who tells me my faults. So if he has an issue with me, he can tell me. But there's a trust factor. That's why he can tell me. That is the why behind that even. How come a friend can tell somebody, oh man, you look terrible, and a person doesn't even get offended? They also laugh. They appreciate the honesty. But if he goes and some stranger comes up to you, and says this to you, you may be offended. There's no relationship there. About the aspect of the truth, there is something else that's necessary to explain. Now, there's a lot of research that has been done about the event that happened at the attack that happened at the house of Hazrat Fatimah, peace be upon her. There are certain things which are accepted on both sides. On Shia and Sunni, they accept. Then we get to some details where both sides do not accept. And this is important to understand, because when you're having a dialogue and you already do not agree on certain things, then that is an important thing to take into consideration about how you discuss. There is an etiquette to discussion itself. There's an etiquette there's some adab, right? So there's things that we already agree on. The things that are most clearly agreed upon, where the work has been done, where it's been cited in Sunni and Shia sources. One is that Fatima bid'atun minni. Fatima is a part of my flesh, right? Who harms her harms me. This is narrated in Sunni and Shia hadith well. Incident at the house of Hazrat Fatima, well narrated, Sunni and Shia hadith well. Then you go into more details. Some attack happened. This seems to be narrated fairly well on both sides. Then you get into further details, and they're not narrated well on the Sunni side. You don't see these narrations in Sunni books about some of these details, which a lot of people on the member love to focus on. So here's the problem with that. If I am a devout Sunni Muslim, then there are as details which I don't have access to necessarily, unless I decide that I'm going to accept these traditions and narrations that have been narrated in Shia books, because they've been narrated completely or more widespread, far more widespread in comparison, and vice versa. And we have to understand, if you're going to have a debate in that sense, then there's not a benefit to this unilateral monologue where I just tell you, output the things that I think based off of the views that I have, without considering where you're coming from and what you're looking at. I'll give you an example. One time there was a brother who passed away in the community, and a brother passed away in the community, and I believe I wasn't in town, maybe, I'm not sure, but it reached out to a brother who is active in the overall community, a Sunni brother, but is also very much a proponent of unity and a very good mu'min brother. Someone asked the brother, this person that passed away, it seems that they were Shia. They were also, but they were a part of this. They went to this particular masjid that was a Sunni masjid. It seems that, but they were actually a Shia Muslim. So there's some differences when it comes to some of the ahkam and things that we do. So he asked the brother was asked, are you going to bury them according to the Shia tradition? And he said, well, brother, I'm going to do whatever sunnah. What's the problem with this statement? I'm going to do whatever sunnah. The problem with that, there's not a problem with the statement. The problem is, what is the implication? What does that mean? If sunnah to him, sunnah means what I know, this is sunnah. The things that I have learned from my imam in the Sunni masjid, according to the Sahih books of Muslim and Bukhari and so on, and the Tirmidhi, Abu Dawood, all of these, this is what I consider sunnah. You might be doing something else, inshallah, Allah accept, but this is what the sunnah is. Well, when that is your reference, then that is how you will see it. So what we call sunnah is not always the same as what Ahl Sunnah brothers call sunnah. So inherently, some of the terms are not going to mean the same things to each party. And you can't use your reference alone when you're having a debate. If you're trying to get something across, that is not so beneficial. For example, I want to prove to all of the Christians of the world that Islam is truth because Islam said it's the truth. So therefore, you should all become Muslim. They're going to say, well, what does the Bible say? Right? You cannot simply do it. So a lot of the good work that has been done academically, it looks at traditions of Sunni and Shia both in depth. And there's a lot of academic work. My focus is not on this work today. My focus is on why we are comfortable with whatever knowledge or even limited understanding to focus on these. This is the only point. One of the ulama said, is the death of Fatima the only thing you know about her? That there was no life? How did she live her life? This one moment, there are certain things that you remember, but then outside of that, there's nothing. You don't remember about her worship? Do you know anything about that? Do anything about her life? Do anything about her modesty? Do you talk about? No, we talk about this one instance because why? Oh, because it makes me feel good about being Shia. It makes me feel like I'm a strong, powerful Shia if I'm talk about Hazrat Fatima and what happened in her martyrdom. Only in this way. There again, I want to emphasize there is a place for debate. The minbar is just not usually the place for debate. And I don't know, most of the time on the minbar, one person's talking. Who can respond? There's a place for debate. If we care, I have seen one of the biggest gatherings. Ayatollah Iraqi is in charge of the organization that is an international organization for Muslim, from Islam or Bain al-Madahib, for all the different sects of Islam. And people at that gathering come from everywhere. Every single place I saw people. I was physically there seeing people from Dubai, from Pakistan, from Nigeria, from all over the Muslim world. There were people there having dialogue, and that was a place where there was an element of unity. People were willing to listen to what someone had to say. There were aspects of unity. There were aspects where people said, you know what? At the end of the day, I'm not going to be able to agree with you, but that doesn't mean that I can't work together on certain things. Because when they're trying to bomb certain places, they're not asking them, wait a minute, before that drone hits there, are you Sunni or are you Shia? Sometimes they're not asking those questions. When they're trying to be, when they're discriminating on people in the Muslim ban, then sometimes they're not asking those questions in detail. It's not all the time when there's a benefit. There are some times when it's clearly some bias, but a lot of times the things that a woman in hijab faces, whether she's Sunni or Shia, are going to be the same issues. If somebody tries to, pray in the airport, the person who's worried about what will happen, it doesn't matter if they're Sunni or Shia, they may have the same worries. So there's a lot of things where we have to understand how does this benefit the Muslim community. Lady Fatima, peace be upon her, should be a source of unity for the Muslim Ummah. We should look at her and see her as a source of unity for the entire Muslim Ummah, not a source for us to derive certain personal agendas or goals from that. So one thing that I'll mention in closing is there's a scholar named Christopher Kolhesi. You may have heard of him. He wrote a book called Fatima, Daughter of Muhammad. He's a priest, a Catholic priest apparently, and he teaches about Hazrat Fatima, wrote his dissertation about her. And one of the things he said was very interesting, that he's talking about the similarities that he notices between Fatima and Maryam, salamullah alayha. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, when it says like someone's reservation, why Fatima is not mentioned in the Quran, we have to understand, first of all, that mentioned in ahadith, and the word of the Prophet is the same word of the Quran. But also, we have to understand that when Maryam is mentioned, then Fatima is mentioned in essence, right? Because the Prophet Muhammad said that Maryam was the greatest woman of her time, and Fatima was the greatest woman of all times. So anywhere you see something that's mentioned about Maryam, then understand Fatima from that. When you see what is mentioned about the piety, the modesty of Hazrat Maryam, then understand that that is magnified even greater in Fatima, peace be upon her. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us more tawfiq to understand the straight path and to walk on the straight path, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevate the status of the al-Bayt, especially Hazrat Fatima sallallahu alayha, Sadiqa, Zakiya, Muhadditha, the one who speaks with the angels. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow her life, her legacy, her charity, her knowledge, her worship to be examples which every woman in this world today sees and follows, and every man and woman, every Muslim, every follower looks to that for guidance to emulate, inshallah. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam.